The Rocket. Age of TheoAbe. Written by Xavier Croston. Read by David John. So, this book begins. Chapter 1. The engine goes boom. Alright, let's get right into it. Chapter 1. The engine goes boom. Theodore Balog was an average-build height man with a passion for badminton. He always was on the lookout for the latest racket, trainer, or club to keep up with the latest in the badminton world. The only problem was he needed help finding an opponent he could beat. Born with a passion for books, before the internet he always had a firm hug from lugging around his set of National Geographic encyclopedias around on a belt strap whenever he left his study. A library was how Theo spent his life till the age of 32, writing his thesis on magnetic gravitational waves as a source of engine propulsion. A little fanfare, except a few notables. In October 1994, he was offered to implement one of his theories in a lab, paid for and managed by NASA. At first, he thought it was a joke. Then, after he realized his error, Theo almost ripped the arm and hand off of the man, shaking as profusely as a jackal. Then, half jogged to the men's bathroom, singing, "I got 2 tickets to paradise," as he ran to the stall. Though not that swift with a racket, in his lab, he could move like he had extra hands. NASA was good to him, and he ran a small team of long-titled rocket scientists working on his unique propulsion engine. Directing waves to propel the engine was very efficient, though the power was sometimes beyond the strength of the current materials they used. Theo had a meteorologist, scouring the country's forges for new and stronger metal alloys. To no avail. The theories were sound, the materials, thus far, not so much. His engines only held up for a few seconds, but it worked. The problem was harnessing all the waves he was directing in a controlled manner that proved elusive. Though if they could get the engine to keep from melting down, it would change travel forever. Through a solid metal wave generator harnessing the magnetic, gravitational, and other waves circulating the solar system. The thrust already produced was staggering. Yet Theo received weeks of flack from his NASA executive bosses every time he burned out a new prototype. The explosions were impressive. Impressive enough, NASA execs deemed all tests that had to be viewed through monitors outside buildings, under tents in the parking lot, which him and the closest never followed. Obama just got elected and the whole country was ready for a new age of growth and hope. Oh, that poster did wonders. Theo never followed politics much, but he was all for this hope Obama had on his posters. His lab had receiving a hazard cleanup after his last explosion. Depleted uranium is a strong material, though he found out not strong enough for the waves he was dealing with after it was the cause of the latest blast. According to all reports, his bosses were all assured the budget at NASA was on good ground. So when a call came from the family lawyer on the passing of his great-uncle Marvin, he had no intentions of staying longer than the funeral over in that long place. According to the lady with the forms, he was granted 2 weeks off. Old Uncle Marv made his money on the high seas. He had shipped anything he could get his ship's hands on there, faster than any the average ship was what he kept on there. It was how he kept his wolves at bay. He would often say, faster than the average ship was how he kept the wolves at bay. Though he was his great uncle, he seemed a generation younger. He restored an old admiral's mansion and a commercial dock on the shores of an old isolated part of Nova Scotia, Canada. On hectares of pine forest surrounded his ocean abode. The Atlantic thrashed the rocks of the shores of his great uncle Marv's dock, where he would often be working on his ship's engines late into the night, when all the workers went to sleep by the fires of the ironstone mansion built from the stone of the local quarry, the only other business in the area besides the odd fishermen living in those bountiful hours. The mansion was a period of separate wings, and every wing seemed like it was a new stage of the development of the building. Jutting across the building ocean. The flight from Dallas to Halifax ended up being 3 flights, and the rent-a-car he ordered wasn't there, but a 4x4 truck was, an F-250. Fall in Canada is spectacular, and the wilds around Canson, Nova Scotia with the rolling hills are an exceptional without an exception. Exceptional without exception. The whole family should be already at the great Uncle Marv's, thought Theo, no doubt in the great hearth room, dipping into his cornucopia of delights. His sister Jenny was a wild card. In her final and 10th year of university, graduating with the illustrious degree of Masters of Theater Arts, Jenny could tell you every detail of the play Cats, but still thought tying shoes was just unnecessary. Her stone-gray eyes gave her the look of mystery, shattered by her booming laugh only heard in bawdy houses. His parents were hippie yuppies, and his father wouldn't be caught dead without his net shoes in summer. Simon and Sally won't be dancing championship won the dancing championship yearly at their local meeting house. It was the great Uncle Marv who would come and take Theo away to work and learn, he would say, work and learn. And work and learn he did, trying to keep up with Uncle Marv. Uncle Marv's workday wasn't for the light-hearted. In those days, he bought the docks there were under construction, and the old admiral's house was large but drafty enough to butt out your pipe. The expansion was 3 times the size of the original, each wing adding a new angle towards the ocean front. It was then in his youth that Theo decided he wanted to build engines deeply in the belly of Marv's ships were the heart of his operation, and there had to be better ways of propulsion, he thought. There just had to be. Theo almost missed the gate leading into Uncle Marv's stone mansion at the Atlantic. He was always so full of vim and vigor, you got the feeling Uncle Marv would outlive us all, he thought, looking at the gate. The vines almost covered the gate. It had been years since he had been here, and it looked like it had been years since anyone had left, this way at least. Marv always preferred traveling by sea. Marv would say, "If I don't got time to travel right, I don't got time to travel." Theo thanked the rental company as he kicked the truck into 4x4 to slog his way down miles of Marv's roads. There were no signs out that way. One could get lost real easily. But Theo knew the way, running those ways every summer. Still, he knew the past like yesterday, and the overgrowth couldn't cover his glee at being back in his summer haunt. Till he got his job with NASA, claimed all his time. His summers were spent there in Nova Scotia. He guessed his father would get the place and sell it as fast as a person with a head on fire and a bucket of water for sale. Sam and Sally were never comfortable outside of New York City. They would always spend most of their time outside the city on the phone catching up with those in the city. The lawyer who called to give him the news was Uncle Marv's closest thing to a friend. Though Zoltan worked for Marv, they were always close and never far from work. Mr. Zoltan Kadar handled the international law accounting for the business. Even after Marv sold the company, Zoltan took care of the investments and stayed in Marv's house, more resembling a modern castle, built so close to the sea to receive a constant mist from the tumultuous Atlantic struggling with the rocky shore. Theo's boss at NASA gave him the latest tech, and he was eager to try out this new thing called a BlackBerry. "It's a smartphone," his boss had said. However, he needed to pack a satellite receiver to make any calls this far from civilization. Though the stores and Marv's were legendary, no one with Zoltan was allowed to look at his climate-controlled storage rooms. Until now, Theo thought. Theo still couldn't believe he was gone. Though he hadn't seen him, he still looked forward to his weekly call with him every Friday, usually going on to the wee hours of the morning. Life won't be the same without his knowledge and constant sauce-filled direction. The sun was setting on the hills as he rolled up, having to do a 10-point turn around Jenny's Range Rover parked in the center of the road. After driving through the ditch, he made it to the landing. The 3 stories of stone loomed cold and dark. Marv liked to keep every light on. He put lights on everywhere. And now that Zoltan is watching, it seems that the pennies are being watched. Rather, I see. And now I don't see, he thought as he grabbed his ancient luggage trunk, light brown leather and full of travel stickers from the previous owners. He wasn't sure if he should ring or just walk in. Theo decided to ring the bell, and he was welcomed by the salty voice of Sultan, who was trained as a lawyer but looked like a bear wrestler, grabbing Theo's trunk like a bag of feathers. He still was the most muscular man he knew. Even at 74, Theo knew he would survive a nuclear attack. Without so much as a word, Zoltan opened the large door as Theo walked up the steps and led him through the forest green entrance, up the red carpet-lined stairs and brass banister. Zoltan let the silence remain, followed the man who resembled a bodybuilder more than an accountant. Zoltan already had his old rooms ready in the north wing, beside the offices where Uncle Marv spent his last decades investing the plots only Zoltan knew. The wainscoting and crown moldings all had the theme of the sea and nothing else. Marv despised organized religion, preferring to worship the sea, and something he only heard him say once. Theo assumed he was making one of his famous jokes. He had just got into his evening suit when Jenny barged in, carrying a bottle of Pusser's rum in one hand and champagne in the other. Stumbling on the rug as she did, Jenny bent her cigarette, but still alight, as she puffed away and yelled her hellos. Everyone assembled in the great hall hearth room, where Sam had a raging fire to distract himself from being away from New York. His mother was on the phone going on about President Obama and all the wonderful things he was going to do, and he couldn't disagree. He liked them. Things were right in America. On October 14th, 2014 was a tumultuous time for NASA, though at the time Theo didn't know it. President Obama decided to cut their budget just 1 month later, though, as I said, No one knew it just then. Zoltan entered the great hearth room around midnight, carrying a stack of red leather-bound papers. Uncle Marv's will. He took and sat in Marv's chair by the fire and motioned for them to come and to sit near. Sam wouldn't leave the fire, so he stood sweating beside his overflowing fire. Zoltan laid out the will with a twinkle in his eye from the oak fire flames. Sam and Sally get the warehouse in town. Jenny had her education paid in perpetuity and a house in New York. As Marv often joked, she would never leave school. Lastly, Zoltan said he let the lands to Theo. And that was a shock. Even though Theo loved it there, NASA was and is, and Florida was his home. And he wouldn't get to work on his rockets from his dream place. Such was life. Get all of your dreams of youth handed to you only to be torn by a new drive. He guessed he would tire there if he could afford to keep it. Zoltan, of course, would stay as long as he wished, if he wished. Though his wealth was immense, his home had been a dock for half a century plus a decade or two. It would be a very large endeavor just to keep it, Theo thought. Theo decided to stay till November to help his folks sell the warehouse and clean out the stock that was in there. No one really knew what they were yet. That was the check for the morning. Zoltan said by the fire, deep into the night, that he would say the inventory. They would see it when they arrived. The warehouse looked dreary and aloof. The rain spilling from the gutters, and they wondered if Sam and Marv had a bat, for there wasn't much demand for warehouses in towns with a population of 100. Canso, Nova Scotia, didn't even have a local bar, but it had a local party house. It was that small. The locks were too rusted for the keys, and they had to borrow some bolt cutters for the local gas station men's hangout. The place was filled with aged rum in oak casks worth a fortune, not to mention the ridiculous parties that the two S's would be throwing from now on after. After the 2 weeks of looking for a company to maintain the lands and the house, Theo still hadn't found anyone. And that was when the bomb dropped on NASA and Theo Balog's engine lab. With 20% budget cuts, his lab filled with burnout engines, though promising, were just too risky for an agency hoping to prove its worth on a diminished budget. He was out of a job, and it wasn't going to get a nice package for going away. Theo decided to stay in Nova Scotia, work on the dock. End of chapter 1.